I want to give a shout out to Brother Sayonetta and all he and his crew that's organizing the Sayonetta Awards program that's coming up. Again, I have a lot of respect for the whole idea. I hope that all of us will tune in, participate. I can guarantee you this, the way things have started. I don't remember the exact program myself, but at one year there was the first Academy Awards program. At one time there was the first Billboard Awards program. You know, so everything starts someplace and things grow. And what I hope for Brother Sayonetta, what I hope for the Black 102 News family, and all the brothers and sisters across the nation. Like I said, I know there are brothers in Philly, there are brothers in Boston, there are brothers in Atlanta, there are brothers in Los Angeles that have very similar platforms like this one. And his awards program, from what I understand, is going to recognize a lot of people. And I look forward to the day when it is a big enough thing for us that we will give it what it is due, attention, and understand that things grow and move forward. So I want to shout out to Brother Sayonetta again for being a pioneer in this medium of getting information to our people. I want to give a shout out to all the people who's followed Brother Sayonetta and are doing it in their communities also. Again, it's a new phenomenon. It's going to move forward. And again, I just wish that I had this type of tool that I could have used when I was a 25-year-old young man.
Peace and Black Power. Welcome to another edition of Babatv. Every time fire out here in Washington, D.C., Chocolate City, the rebirth of Chocolate City, with this mighty scholar and beloved elder of mine back in the house, Brother Tehuti. And I guess very briefly, everybody's been talking about it, the issue concerning Brother Bill Cosby. Any thoughts, Brother Tehuti?
First, before I answer that question, let me give a shout out to Babatv Nation, Black News 102 Nation. Hello everybody, Black Power. The Bill Cosby phenomena is very tragic. I don't know 100% all the facts in the case, but here again, the behavior, the alleged behavior of the brother brought these charges, you know, on him. You know, like the American criminal justice system, which has crucified and imprisoned so many black men, you know, like during the history of this country. It really makes me wonder whether or not this is, you know, all put together just, again, to crucify another black man, or if in fact the brother led that type of life. My own knowledge of other people in the entertainment industry, going back especially during the late 60s and early 70s, when everything was everything, a lot of that behavior was what we call wide open, you know. And from testimony that he gave himself about securing certain type of pharmaceuticals to give to women, paints a bad picture. So whether if in this actual case this was actually a you know, drug a woman and then rape her, I just don't know. But the fact that he's been found guilty of it, just like the other this Me Too movement, where once women start talking about the men in their offices and other places who had hit on them, touched them, said some very negative things to them, reflects what was the American workplace. I mean, it was real that in a society, a male-dominated society, that a lot of men tried to get away with all they could from their positions of power and the power that they had over women. And so for me to say that those kind of things didn't take place, I would be foolish, because I know in fact they did. I know of brothers in situations, in fact, when one of my own relationships back in the 80s, I had to go to my girlfriend's place of employment. and have just a very, what I call a frank and intellectual discussion with her boss, and just told him that I would never want to hear another conversation from her like I had over the weekend. You know, like he knew what I was talking about, and the rest of the time she worked there, she never came back with another conversation telling me something that he had said or a proposition that he had put to her. So black men in power, I know, abused women. White men in power abuse women. Here in the nation's capital, as I would say, this is one of the homes of it, where the men on Capitol Hill, the congressmen, the senators, people working in the executive branch, because of their positions, that a lot of them use their power to seduce women or to say all kind of things about women. Remember, I think it was 1982, 83 when Clarence Thomas was was being evaluated to become a justice of the Supreme Court, and the sister told of the things that he did to her, and all these hypocrites, these congressmen, these senators, who thought that she was lying and this man was of such character that he wouldn't do things like that. Well, what she said then pales as compared to testimony that's coming out today by women telling on their bosses and other quote-unquote important men in their business structure or that harass them and proposition them. A lot of women, the only way they could move up on their jobs was to sleep with their bosses. That's a regularly known thing here in Washington, D.C. So when you're in a sick society like America has been, pretending to be this great country, the greatest country on the earth, with all of these super high values and what have you, but behind the scene, it is one of the most viciously hypocritical societies has ever existed on the face of the earth. Not just because of what they did to us, the black man, and bringing us into captivity, bringing us across the ocean and putting us in the institution of slavery. What they did to the real aboriginals of this land base here, as it goes, the natives who were here, the genocide to wipe them out and take their land base in the name of, what do they call it? Manifest destiny, as if somehow God had already predetermined that the white man should be in control of this land base from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And yet, during the time they're proclaiming this, all the negative activity that they conducted toward us, the negative activity they conducted toward the people who were here already, just shows you how hypocritical the country is. To have a code that all men are created equal, laid out in its Declaration of Independence in 1776. Yet, here we are in my own lifetime, between 1960 and 1965, we had to literally, especially the youth, joining forces with the adults, had to fight this man in order to get civil rights and voters' rights for ourselves. So we know what the real nature of the country has always been. So it's a phony concept that we're all this great country, we're all, you know, what do we call it, with all Johnny goody-goody two-shoe people running around in it. That is just not the case. So was Bill a victim of his own behavior? I don't know. He says he didn't do it. But was that atmosphere prevalent in American society during the time period when he's accused of doing it? The answer is yes. People in high places, I'm sure that most of the audience have heard of the thing of what's called the casting couch in the movie and television industry, that in order for women to get acting jobs in those industries, that a lot of them had to sleep with producers, directors, and the stars, the male stars of the movie or the TV show. That's the nature of what the underground knew of what was going on in Hollywood and in New York City. So was Bill a part of that? He got pretty big, and maybe he got too big for his own britches and thought that he was like one of them and that he could do the things that he was accused of. I just don't know. I don't think that we should be embarrassed as a race because of one man getting convicted of this. I don't think it's a cause that we should go out and start marching up and down the streets and demanding the freeing of Bill Cosby because of this conviction. But I do agree with something that Brother Sinbad said. I saw a video this morning where Brother Sinbad said, well, if you all are going to castigate him and negatively, and you want to take your honorary doctorates back, you want to take his picture down or take his name off certain things, well, give him his money, all the money he gave you. Give him his money back. You know, if he's such a negative person on this end now, how many black college graduates who graduated with scholarships that were paid for by Bill Cosby? You want to give your degree back? Do you want to raise the money to pay him back for him having paid for your scholarship? Nobody's talking about those things, but we want to say something negative about the brother. Well, from the philosophy of ancient black people who lived in the Nile Valley, there was something in the culture to see the truth of the matter. There is negative and positive in all of us. And I'm sure that, you know, like, I'm not going to measure how bad negative is, but we all have done something short of the greatness of a perfect person in our lives. The accumulation of these accusations against Bill, for me, is just one thing. So it's not hard for me to believe it. I don't think we should make that big a thing out of it. There are a lot of stars, from athletes, entertainers, and what have you, who have, though they've had a great career, have done something in their personal lives that's brought shame on them. So is it possible? Yes, it's possible. He was convicted of it. What should we do about it? I think we should all look at the whole case and look at it as a lesson for how we conduct our own lives, how we teach our young sons and nephews, how we teach them they should conduct their lives, and also how we teach our daughters and our nieces, our granddaughters, how they should interact with men, and if any man should attempt to do those things to them, because that is in the American society, that of course they should reject it, and if it happens they should turn the person in. Again, we have to deal with the fact of the type of real society America is. And you know, you just can't float around living in a cesspool without getting some stuff on you. You know, you're gonna get some doo-doo on you if you're in a cesspool. The Hollywood entertainment business, though they glorify themselves annually with awards programs and all those kinds of things, for years the behind the scene information has been that this is really a dirty, nasty business to be involved in. The same thing with the TV industry, that though a lot of people grow up and they want to be stars, they want to see their face on the TV, the little screen or the big screen, there seems to have been a price to pay in order to get that stardom. Even the exposure of this guy from the Olympics, this Olympic doctor, in order for these little girls to want to go out there and prance around and be star gymnasts and have, you know, like the glory of the Olympics, here they were now saying they were sexually abused. I believe they were, and kept their mouths shut because they wanted the glory. So it's a sick society that we live in, and it's again, for a person who has done the amount of good that he has done with the wealth that he accumulated from his career in the entertainment business, we can't overlook that about Bill Cosby either. But if in fact he did those things, again, I don't want to really castigate him, but if in fact he did those things, he has the money, he has the lawyers, and he's still fighting the case in court. He lost this round, but his lawyers say they're going to appeal. They say they have there were enough errors in the trial that they have a solid ground to appeal this case on, so perhaps it's not all over. He's been convicted, that's on his record now, but that does not mean that this whole trial thing could be overturned in the future.
All right, T, let's switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about our sojourn here in America, and these religions being forced upon us, and all the good things that we did, you know, coming up out of oppression, to take those books that were handed to us by the slave masters and their children, how we took what we had to work with, such in the case of the Rastas or whichever conscious group that might be following the Quran, took what they had to work with at the time and made it a liberationary tool for us in this time.
Okay. Good. Well, again, you know, like for a whole people, again, and I should really say as black people, as Africans, many different families of Africans, you know, like primarily in West Africa, but when you look at the whole institution of the captivity of our people, I'll go back to 800 AD with the Arab invasion of Africa, all right, and the fact that Islam started capturing Africans on the East Coast and selling them into slavery, you know, in 800 AD. And that continued all the way up to the European expansionism, when the Europeans caught up in 1444 and started taking Africans first to Europe, and then they brought them to the Western Hemisphere to be slaves on the plantations to produce goods and services for the development of Europe. Now, during this whole process, Africans are under fire on both sides of the continent. And as I was discussing with you earlier, a bigger question is, why were we in such a low state of development that we were weak enough in order for outside forces to be able to come in and take us into captivity? See, why hadn't, you know, if at one time we built the great mighty cultures, the civilization of the Nile Valley, that of Babatv in southern Africa, the great Zulu Empire in South Africa, and what have you, since we did reach those heights, why were we in such a weak state that we were able to be captured and brought into captivity in the first place? That I don't know all the answers, but the fact of the matter is we were weak enough that that did occur. So once you have Africans from all over the continent, all right, in the institution of slavery in the Western Hemisphere, and it was all, you know, from the time the first brothers set foot here up until the end of the institution of slavery, there was always resistance to it as one. And though we were not allowed to read and have any of our own materials in our languages, one of the books that the white man used to enforce and enslave us, which was the Christian Bible, we were able to get a hold of it and began to utilize different passages in it to help us break free and do some other things as such. Once the captivity was, once slavery ended toward the end of the 1800s, 1888, across most African slavery ended. We began to use, again, this Bible as a tool, again, to lift ourselves up, to build African communities on the land base where we were, whether here in America or where we were in the islands, you know, like the West Indies and in South America. So we use the Bible as a tool to lift ourselves up and to start rebuilding ourselves. Again, the institution of Islam was reintroduced to us in a different kind of way, because being enslaved by Christianity, Islam was used as a tool to free our minds from all of the negativity of Christianity, because in the Bible is telling slave, obey your master. And so as long as you have those kind of passages being put toward you, we had men and women who were intelligent enough to find another set of religious documents that to help teach us to be moral people. I mean, how are we going to teach our sons and daughters to you know, like morality, to grow up within our own communities? So they use another set of religious documents to try to, again, reestablish a level of morality in us that had been broken during the course of our captivity, during the whole course of the period of slavery. But after 40 years, 35 to 40 years after the end of American slavery, as an example here, by the turn of the century 1900, again, now we have a generation who were born after the captivity, who grew up with a different mindset and were able to utilize these tools to create even a more advanced form of independence and morality in our community, where by the time we got down, 100 years out of slavery, again, though I was in the student movement with Stokely Carmichael and the brothers of SNCC, the older folk who had been part of the church, and through the leadership of Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Andrew Young and these other ministers, were able to use the passages of the Bible as an inspiration to help organize more and more people to help fight for a more complete form of freedom from the second-class status that the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision of 1896 put us in, to get us into a state of the Civil Rights Act being passed in 1964 and the Voters' Rights Act being passed in 1965. So we've used the tools to enhance us on this path, on this long journey toward freedom. However, there have also been those who have what I call a more elementary understanding of these tools, and they've only used them to create congregations to follow them, as opposed to creating a mindset, to free people. So you have, today we have these big evangelical individuals with these great big churches, and what have you, that's just basically teaching the community some form of morality, but for the most part, it's not a freedom type of teaching. Now it's just a Christian dogma type of teaching.
Giving you money, be sure to give you.
Yeah, oh yeah, well, yeah, you can't get away from pass the plate. Pass the basket. Before you leave here, pass the basket. And the other unfortunate thing that for me, in terms of how elementary we are, 20 years ago, I developed a theory in which I basically stated that since we left captivity in 1865, that for every 10 years we've been away from captivity, we have aged or matured 1 year as a whole people. So after 150 years of quote-unquote freedom from slavery, actually we're still acting as if we're acting like a 15-year-old as opposed to a full adult, collectively as a people. What do I mean by that? Adults take care of themselves. They look for themselves to take care of themselves. That's the #1 law of the universe. We still have, and a lot of our leadership are still teaching a philosophy of the white man owes us something. We need some free, white man give me this. Like white man don't move into my community, let me develop my own, because we're still asking white folks as if they are adults and we're children. All right, we have that relationship because we have not decided to take charge of ourselves. As an example, we're here in 1976. One of my favorite entertainment groups of all time, Parliament Funkadelic, had a record out called Chocolate City. And the one thing about the nation's capital that everybody knew, 70% of the population of this 10-mile square were African Americans. The 9/10 of the city council were African Americans. The mayor was African American. And so here we have something, we're in charge of ourselves, but during that whole time period, the basic philosophy of the leadership was to try to convince white companies and the government in this area to give black folks some jobs. The city council didn't create any kind of industry for black folks to make stuff here. You know, they did not create anything that would be basically black in the city except for just out living here. So we continued to go beg white folks for jobs. We kept looking for positions. After the riots, actually after the riot of 1968 when King was assassinated, a lot of the middle class and the upper middle class black folks, they fled the city scared of the poor black people just like the white people did, all right, and left just poor black people in the city, all right. Here we are now. In fact, in 1976, when that occurred, when the record came out, the Washington Post ran an editorial criticizing the fact that the nation's capital would be called Chocolate City, and in it stated that they were creating a 25-year plan to take their capital back. All right, where here we are, you know, we had it by living in majority, but we created no institutions in it. You know, Howard University over across the street was already here. You know, we didn't create anything. We haven't created any kind of industry or anything. I tried to get the city council to sponsor a project over in Anacostia where I wanted to use what I call the George Washington Carver plan. The great scientist who created the cookbook of 100 things to do with a peanut. Well, why can't we create a company where we get young black folks to start creating a business, you know, like with peanuts? We're going to cook them, we're going to roast them, we're going to dry roast them, we're going to cover them with candy, we're going to do all kind of things, but create a product, DC Peanuts, all right, owned and operated by black folk. And then let's compete with M&M's, let's compete, I mean, with the, you know, Mars Candy Company and every, you know, with the Planters Company, let's compete with everybody else. But let's have an industry where we're making a product and selling something. You know, like in terms of, as opposed to just going to get a job from the white man or from the federal government. What we the position that we find ourselves in today, we are wage slaves. We have jobs, we just getting paid. And we are satisfied if we just have a higher up job than the other person. And so we don't want to own and create anything. Here again, our youth, again going back to the young brothers of the Bronx and Harlem up in New York City. In the late 70s and early 80s, they started a new crave and a new way of expressing themselves musically called hip-hop, as such, right? And the hip-hop industry is a multi-billion dollar music industry today. As such. Now, yeah, we have Jay-Z, we have 2 or 3 entrepreneurs, you know, like brothers who are entrepreneurs in the hip-hop industry, but we don't control it. Another creation of our youth from our inner skills, ourselves as black people, all across the world, this music now is impacting the world, and we don't control it. As such. See, we had no way of concretizing and owning and staying in control of something that we created. As such, that's part of the problem that we have on our sojourn here. We have ideas. We've been on a long journey. What are we going to do with it? What does religion have to do with it? Well, religion will give you a sense of your moral direction, but we need to be on more than just a moral course. The problems that we have is holistic. See, like, and to say that I'm free because I contact the divine in my own specific way. Now, whether that way is Kemetic, whether it is Islamic, whether it is Moorish, whether it is Christian, I mean, those are choices that people are making on how they can commune with what they call the divine, or what they call God, or Allah, the creator of the universe itself. How are you going to communicate, and what set of doctrines have been written down that you think tell the correct story of how you should conduct yourself? That's what religion is. But religion doesn't tell you how you should organize yourself to interact with your fellow man. See that in the English language, that word is political. It comes from a Greek word polis, meaning P-O-L-I-S. You know, which means the interaction of people in the state or in the city is where the word really came from. So if you're not going to participate, if your community is not going to be organized to say this is what we want in our community, we have to be, that's politics. But we haven't really decided to create our own political form yet. So far, the mistake of the leadership of the 1950s, who thought the best path for us in this country would be to integrate into what the white American had built, all right, caused us to destroy the black economy, which had been developed primarily between 1865 and 1965. We had 100 years and developed our own separate and unequal black economy. You know, we had our own restaurants, we had our own bars, we had our own theaters. I mean, because we couldn't go to the, you know, like the white American-owned establishments where there were large numbers of us, we created our own separate and unequal economy. Now, in my high school, as an example, we didn't want to close my high school and integrate into the 3 white high schools in the county. We were satisfied with our school. We wanted an equal part of the money so that we could get better equipment, better books, and what have you, but we wanted to stay where we were. We did not want to give up a beautiful school system that we developed in segregation in order to integrate into the white system. See, so the idea of integration inherently destroyed the separate black economy, which took 100 years to build, like I said, between 1865, the end of slavery, and 1965, the passage of the Voters' Rights Act, as such. So religion won't address that. I mean, you can chant what you want, you can meditate the way you want, you can get down on your knees a number of times a day if you want. You can only address God once a week on Sunday if you want, but that's addressing your spirituality or how you see your spiritual self and what spiritual guidelines you want to give yourself. But how you're going to interact with yourself, your people, and other peoples in a multicultural society is political. And for a lot of people who talk a lot of stuff, you know, like they never address the question of politics. What are we going to do to control our community? As such, well, now we can't control our community. Here in the nation's capital, there's a controversy going on with the Ward 8 representative on the city council. Know if you heard about that? Okay. Yeah. Well, the young brother. He's a young brother. I think with good intentions in his heart. I don't think that he was adequately prepared to be elected as a city council member. All right, to handle the affairs of the poor residents of Ward 8. But he organized, he ran, and he won. Now, he gave it is said in the media that he gave a $500 contribution to the Nation of Islam out of his city council funds. So they got him on that. And he saw a program on YouTube in which somebody was trying to teach about the influence that the Rothschild family still impacts on American society. And now, if you go back, if any of you are familiar with the Steve Coakley lectures of the 90s, you know who the Rothschilds were. The Rothschilds are the persons who control the wealth of Europe. They're the ones who amassed the money, loaned money to France, Great Britain, and Germany. Amschel Rothschild had 5 sons. He sent one to each one of those countries. And so the national bank of most of those countries are still controlled by the banks that the Rothschilds set up back in the 1800s and early 1900s. And he asserted that the Rothschilds were, the Rothschild family controlled the sciences, or the science mechanisms which controlled the weather. Now, I didn't see the YouTube program. I heard about it. I didn't hear his full statement, but of course I've heard about it, and he's catching fire. But what I'm trying to say is, if a community doesn't have a set of issues that it wants addressed by the person representing them, that is organized, establish what your issues are, and this is who we're going to elect, somebody who represent these issues. And for my city councilman, this is what I want you working on. I don't want you out there working on something to empower somebody else somewhere else. I don't want you talking about theories that you've heard off YouTube and you've done no real in-depth evaluation and education on the topic. We have to have people who represent us, The representative to the New York City City Council that represents Harlem. All right? The issues that that person should be addressing are those issues that are most important to the black folk living in Harlem. The same thing the person represent on the city council from the Bronx, you know, like Brooklyn, where most of the people are. They should be representing their interests. And how do you elect someone to represent your interests? You organize and determine what are the issues that are pertinent to you where you are in your community, and this is your bill of issues, and you're only going to vote somebody who is going to address these issues. The community decide. You don't let somebody come into your community slick talking you, you know, like promising you the world. You know, like, if you elect me, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do this for you. And you elect that person because it sounds like what he said was good. Now, see, communities need to understand how to use their power. You only elect somebody to represent the issues that represent you. And again, we haven't had, every 2 to 4 years, you hear a lot of people, especially Democrats, running around talking about we need to have voter education so we can get people signed up so that they can vote. But none of these groups will ever have a real political education session for their community. See, sit down with explain what politics is, you know, how politics is organized, what community issues are, what things then need to be addressed in your community, how you set up your own bill of issues that you want addressed, and how you're only going to vote for somebody who understands those issues and are promising if they're elected they're going to go down and have those things addressed for you. We haven't matured to the point where our communities are doing that as such, right? And unfortunately, one of the most successful jobs that traditionally the black man has had since we've gotten out of slavery in this country is being a preacher with a congregation. And as long as that congregation, that church, you know, like, is doing just what it wants, we tend to have our politics wrapped up in our church, you know, like in addressing our spirituality. Where we are today, you know, like those of us, we are very fortunate being alive today and having seen and witnessed this in our lifetime. We reached a point where a black person got elected to the presidency of the United States. All right. And what did that mean in terms of the development of black communities across this country? Most people would say nothing. All right. In fact, a lot of people were very disappointed. They are proud that a black man was finally president during their lifetime, but the fact that what was accomplished for their behalf to lead us, you know, like into the land of milk and honey, nothing. Because, again, as Barack Obama said himself, he wasn't representing the African American civil rights agenda when he ran. Therefore, all the black leadership of the civil rights organizations, all the black politicians already in office were all on Hillary Clinton's team when he ran, because they were in the Democratic Party. He's an outsider. He didn't come up with us. He didn't fight the battles we fought, so we're not going to support him. As such, here's a man became president, and so the black community, even though we had a black congressional caucus and what have you, didn't have any influence on the first black president this country had, you know, in the modern times. And I use that term, the first black president in modern times, because as we know from our own studies, that according to American law, that there were already people who ran and posed as white people who had black blood. You know, and according to American law, if you have one drop of black blood, you're black. But the Warren G. Harding family and some of the Dwight D. Eisenhower family We can go back and trace the genealogy of some of these past presidents and know that according to their own agenda, that by law, technically, there already were African Americans that had been in the United States presidency, but not one who, right on the surface, outright was one. So we look at Barack Obama as the first. Again, if you don't go up there, there's a book called The 5 Negro Presidents, and I think there's another one called The 6 Black Presidents, that are both, if you Google them, the books will come up. Find a black bookstore nearest you and go out and order the book from the black bookstore. Don't go on Amazon.com and order it. You're not helping your own community. For your convenience, you might get it faster in a couple of days, but all you're doing is helping a big white corporation. But look for these books, you know, like go out and find a black bookstore and order these books from the black bookstore. And by the way, speaking of a black bookstore, I want to give a shout out to the brother who gave me the name of the other black bookstore back in Harlem back in this early 70s when I went up there. It was the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life bookstore was the name of the bookstore that that I just could not remember. But it was a great bookstore that the black residents or the residents of Harlem had to go down and get their selection. And that's where I purchased the Doc Ben's book, The Black Man of the Nile, the Tree of Life bookstore in New York City. So other things going on in the community right now. Again, you know, our attention span sometimes is short. I think it's all because of the when people talk about conspiracies and what's going on, you know, like, so sometimes our interest and attention gets moved by social media or the news media, you know, like in some form, because we don't have an active agenda that we are still working on as a group today and stuff. Again, here we are in 1998, 20 years ago. If you'll recall, we had a great big 3-day seminar here in the District of Columbia called The Plan for the 21st Century, in which we asked at that time the leading black scholars of the day, especially those African Senate thinking black scholars, came to DC, and we had a long conference trying to draw a conclusion of what should be our agenda and direction for the 21st century before we got into it. And here we are 20 years later, and collectively as a people we still don't have an agenda. So what do African people living in America want? You know, do African people living in America really want to separate and look for another landmass someplace where they can all go move and start a new country? Do the African American mindset still stay in the same place? Well, we helped build this country, so our mindset, all we want to do is whatever company that Americans build to make money here, give us a job in it. Is that the height of our aspirations? We just want a job. You know, like, you know, like, again, we're the majority of the men who play basketball in the National Basketball Association, but we don't own it and control it. You know, like, we're the majority of the men who run and into each other and catch footballs on Sundays. You know, like, in our influence in the NFL is still just that as players. You know, like in athletics. So what do we want? I mean, do we want our own thing, or do we really want to live in what we want to integrate into the society that white America directed with their brain power, and we helped create with our physical energy as we were the laborers who helped build this thing? We have to make a decision for ourselves. See, we can't have it both ways. You know, one of the tragedies, again, when we began to make monies that represented our academic degrees and what have you, became middle-class persons, we didn't decide, well, we wanted to, we live in the ghetto, so let's fix it up. Let us renovate it. Let us renovate the home. Let us own this ourselves. Yeah. You know, but instead of wanting to do that, no, we decided to leave where we were and go out and live, integrate into the suburban white community, and left the poor blacks all living in the what we call the ghettos of the poor aspects of the inner cities of America. See, Detroit is being rebuilt. Washington, D.C. is being rebuilt. I understand aspects of New York City is being rebuilt, like that. But when we were living there and had the means, rather than to stay there and decide to design and uplift this thing for ourselves, we moved out to where the white folks, we want to live amongst white people. See, and left the poor folks alone in the city. When you were talking about the anger that some young black people have today, I can understand why. A very good friend of mine from whose parents immigrated here from South Africa back in the 70s, as such, said he never could understand why, since he's been here, he can see all these other people who've come here from other places all around the world and start their own thing, their own businesses. In fact, he talked about this thing with these native peoples who are moving back north of the border from Mexico and Central America. I mean, everywhere you go, you look at their businesses, like their businesses, they reproduce their culture in their businesses. They name their businesses after themselves and their own stuff, right, without any kind of fright. But look up and down in our community, what one symbol do you see on African American business that represents Africa? See, what import business of importing African goods here are owned and controlled by us? We are the retail outlets in our communities for distributing goods from Africa. See, even if we don't implement the UNIA and ACL plan, that's the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, the Marcus Garvey organization. See, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Even if we don't implement it as Garvey outlined it in 1921, in 2018, elements of that are still viable if we would just have the mindset of changing how we look at ourselves and look at where we are in the universe and what we want to do with ourselves. I mean, do we just want to be known, does this generation just want to be known as having had good jobs working for white people? Does this generation not have any creativity within their own minds and not want to create their own thing? Now you asked me a question that I avoided, not on purpose, but because I'm getting old and sometimes my mind shifts. But let's go back looking at again the Bible and how it was used in the islands as opposed to being used here by black folks. Now, in their understanding of the Bible, so my good friends from Jamaica, and especially those that were the Maroons living up in the hills, not those black folk that had been colonized down in the cities, working for the British colonialists, and then once the colony left and they had to go back home, and the black folks they left in charge still had the mindset of the colonialists, right? But these brothers looked at the whole thing and they pulled an extract out of the Judeo-Christianity and created a religious cultural movement that is economic. And I'm talking about Rastafarianism. Not just the colors, not just the songs, but from the Ital foods and the restaurants and stuff that their dress style, what they wear, from the turban, the hats, and what have you. They created their own cultural expression from their religion. They don't look like the Englishman. They're not trying to be Englishmen. They're being Rasta. They look at the concept that they are direct descendants from the original man and the sons of the divine. Why did the Africans who left captivity in America not move in that same kind of direction? Well, one of the reasons why is because there were very few communities that were isolated totally away from the ownership class in America. And again, like I said, the leadership class in America, the leadership class of black folk in America, decided on a construct of integration. Now, where did this leadership in America come from, as opposed to the phenomena in the islands? Well, one of the legacies that the colonial master left in black people was his love of our women. And his love of our women caused him to have on the side relationships with black women, wherever he were. And especially here in America. So he created his sons and daughters with these black women were classified as black, no matter what their complexion were and how they looked. And so during the course from the early 1800s up to 1865, in many, many cases, these white plantation owners freed their sons that they had with these black women. In many cases, gave them a grub stake and sent them north or sent them to free territories. So from 1800 to 1865, the leadership of free blacks, for the most part, were what we call light-skinned black people or mixed-race black people. See, like, and part of their attitude was they always wanted to prove to their daddies that they were just as good as they. And their object always was to integrate into the things their daddies built. Now again, you almost remember the day when in American society, upper-class black folks created a fraternal organization based on complexion. If you were darker than a brown paper bag, or if you didn't have 1 inch of straight hair, you couldn't get into this social organization. There was one of the high schools here in Washington, D.C., Dunbar High School. You had to be, if you lighter than a brown paper bag, as a student to get to go to that high school up until the 1950s. All right? So this color complex of where the sons and daughters of white slave masters and then their sons and daughters created a separate class situation where they were the leadership of the free blacks. And once slavery ended in 1865, they were the leadership of black folks, period, who just got out of slavery, because most of the dark-skinned black folks, the other black folks, were just getting out of slavery. These folks were educated. They had already been free for a while. So their policies of wanting to integrate in with American society was always the tip of the spear in terms of the political attitude of black folks in this country. In fact, one of the tragic statements that I've ever read by a black man that we would consider one of the great black leaders, W.B. Du Bois, about Marcus Garvey. He called him a little short, black, ugly Negro. And want to note the audacity of this man to want to assume the leadership of the Pan-African movement. So still, for a man who was as smart as he was, in his mind, he had a color complex about dark-skinned black folks. And this lasted in our community all the way up through 1965, when we got the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Acts passed, whereas the leadership were folks who wanted to integrate into America. And the reason why you'll find that most of the people who went into the UNIA were the darkest of the dark black folks, because they had a dark man talking about Africa for Africans, and we're not ashamed of that. What a lot of black people today don't know is this same group of people. In 1825, they started a series of conventions called the Negro Convention Movement. And in the 5th National Negro Convention Movement, that's how it's listed in the books, that happened in 1835, 1834, 1835. And they resolved to, we'll stop calling ourselves Africans. We will strike the name of Africa from all of our institutions, and from henceforth we'll be known as people of color. So these mixed race black people gave up the identity of all black people because of a deal they made with an organization called the American Colonization Society, which was formed in 1816, whose primary purpose was to ship all the free blacks out of the country because they didn't want any free blacks in the country. They just wanted slaves in the country. And if there were free blacks in the country would continue to advocate for the freeing of their brothers and sisters who were still in captivity. So this American Colonization Society was the one who got the money together and went over to West Africa and bought the land, they said, I'll put quotation marks, they bought the land in Western Africa and set up what became the colony of Liberia, to ship all free blacks back to Africa so that they couldn't be here, all right, advocating for freedom. But the problem with that was that only the ethnically pure black Africans who were free wanted to go. The light-skinned one said, no, you know, like, we ain't Africans. If y'all send us to Africa, they'll kill us over there. So they wanted to stay here. And so they agreed on behalf of the race to stop calling the race African. At that time, we had the Free African Society, the African Benevolent Society, we had the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. Most of the institutions that we started, we had African Lodge number 459 of Prince Hall Masons, of Black Masons. All our institutions were African because we were African people, right? But these mixed race Africans who didn't see themselves as African, because they had the one drop rule, they were being called black, all right? Therefore, as the leadership, they took the name Africa out of the name of all of our institutions on the one hand, and they maintained themselves in the leadership of free black folks, and they're the ones whose agenda was integration the whole time. Even up to the 1960s, the youth movement was a freedom movement. The adults was an integrationist movement. And we need to understand that so that we can make a correction, look at what we've already gone through the last 40, 50 years, so that decide on decisions that we're going to make for the next 40 or 50 years need to be based on accurate information of what the behavior was which led to the decisions that we made. Now, there's a phenomena in our community, I hate to put it this way, but because of oppression and a mental state of a second-class status mentally, black men tend to love going places where their testosterone and adrenaline can be revved up. They can throw their fists in there, yell, yeah, yeah, hey, you know, like what, hey, here's somebody describing all of the negativity that's happened to us since we've come into captivity. I mean, look, again, if I could borrow a phrase from the Nation of Islam, there's never been a man more akin to what their religion says is the devil than those people who kept us in captivity and who control this country. His behavior, I mean, you can't make a deal with the devil. You really can't make a deal with the devil. But our leadership tends to have an attitude that over time, if we keep singing the right kind of song and we keep being nice enough to these people, that eventually the devil will turn into an angel and do what's right. See, that's not going to happen. But because that's not going to happen, we have some folk whose whole agenda is to keep the brothers going by having, you know, like meetings where we can yell and scream and feel good when we come out of there, but not have a plan for changing our condition. See, some people are real adept at describing in all types of ways the negativity that this man is heaping upon us up to this day. But what is the plan for change? See, we don't have to wait 20 years. I mean, this is the internet age and the Facebook age. You know, we can start doing things right now. We can communicate. When this goes on the air on YouTube, it'll be seen in Los Angeles and London. It'll be seen in New York City. It'll be seen in Miami. It's going to be seen worldwide as such. So, you know, like we have instant communications, and we need to have an instant forum where we absolutely analyze what we've done and what is the best course for the future. See, If we want to self-segregate ourselves, if that's what the conclusion is, well, what's the plan to get that done? You know, what is the attitude that produces in some black people that I feel better about myself, or I feel like I have arrived if my next door neighbor is a white person? Where did that attitude come from? I mean, like, why is it there? I mean, like, hey, I mean, I see these, we have a couple of young men who play basketball in this city for this city's basketball team. They just got $100 million contracts. And where do you think they bought their houses? They have arrived. Where did they buy their houses? As such, right? I mean, we have, you know, like entertainers. I mean, hey, I mean, so we have people who are sane. I mean, I understand that, what's the boy's name? Kanye West is tweeting with Donald Trump now. If that is not symbolic of insanity, I don't know what is. See, like, or maybe because he's got millions because of his music business and what have you, now that he's arrived. After all, he married a non-African woman and got his little children and what have you living out there in Hollywood with his big stuff. So he's no longer one of us. So he has developed a friendship with the President of the United States and say, hey, it even announced, I believe on YouTube somewhere, that he's thinking about running in 2020. From the streets of Chicago. He's going to duplicate what Barack Obama did. He's got more money than Barack had, so maybe he can run.
Got influence over him like he say he did, or him well. Why don't he ask Donald Trump to make reparations of land and currency of reality?
Oh, yeah. You know,
all of that for all that bull crap.
Because he ain't, see, Kanye doesn't need reparations. He got $100 million. He got $100 million bank account. He ain't looking for reparations. He's gonna say, hey, you gotta learn how to rap or do what he did and write you 2 or 3 songs and get paid. But he has, you know, again, and look, when Kwame Ture came back here in 1972, and we actively started the All African People's Revolutionary Party, for the first time in my life, I really understood the need of having political education. We had work study groups. We studied a specific set of books, learn our history first. Then we studied books to learn what are the types of economic systems that we can operate under. What type of politics are there? Let's get a full understanding of these before stepping out and deciding to do something. We got educated first, as such, right? But we were too radical. See, to say the all African, the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We want a revolution. This is what we know. All the poor black people in this country have the same problem. It's poverty and poor, right? It's poor, poverty. It's not going to change individually. We have a collective problem. We need a collective solution to that problem. So that's what. So when we talk about a revolution, we're talking about a revolution that addresses the problems. We're not talking about let's help one person at a time. I mean, when I was a kid, I had the disease called chicken pox. They say it doesn't come around anymore. Well, with chicken pox, you got all these little red bumps all over your face, right? These poxes all over your body. And the way to cure you of chicken pox is not to come up with a medicine that you put on each bump and hope that's going to drop that one, and then one on your stomach, on your leg. They're going to know. You take a medicine to cure the whole body of what the disease is. And the disease that's impacting poor black America is capitalism. That's the disease. You have to address that, the economic system. The way that we can solve our problem, it's not for everybody else. I mean, I look at how the Asians have solved their problem, who've come to America, especially those since the Vietnam War. They use collectivism. Everything on it's hardly any individually owned Asian business. All right, collectively they pool their monies together. I look at the greater Jewish community. See, they don't use capitalism. They use collectivism to solve their problem. See, they don't tell you what it is, but they use collectivism. It's a collective thing. So they use collectivism, which they have misnamed socialism, to solve their problem. See? But they keep telling us in order for us to solve our problem, we have to use individualism. See, and then we buy into that. So as an individual, Kanye as an individual is a rich man. And some of these basketball players, like what's my man's name, and I think he's doing some good things with the wealth he's generated. James. LeBron James. He's doing some things. He's got a lot of money, you're right? But he's still using individualism. Now imagine if 10 of these brothers that's making $100 million over the next 5 years would form a collective company to address the problems in our communities, as opposed, all right, you do this, you do this. Or imagine if these cats would, instead of letting their agent or their lawyers decide what charities they're going to give their money to, all right, in order to get their tax write-offs. What if they really had somebody from from our community to actually have a community list of programs and things that's being developed to change the economics of the black community, and select those to get their monies to? See, we have to have, again, our problem is a collective problem. We need a collective answer. And so the best solution that's been offered in the last 100 years is revolutionary politics. And every brother that stepped out there to do that now, the FBI and all the forces of the American military-industrial complex, will come down on anybody who is preaching revolutionary politics in America. See? And to make sure that that doesn't set foot, one of the things they'll do through the prison industrial complex, they'll work with brothers who they want to get out, and they'll send them out into the community to sabotage any collective efforts. Again, if you don't believe me, go back and read the COINTELPRO, the books about the counterintelligence program of the 1970s and what the federal government did to the real revolutionary black organizations that were in this country. So I'm hoping that there was a sign a couple of weeks ago during the Brother Malik Zulu Shabazz brought a lot of people here to Washington, D.C. for the Black Men's Convention. A lot of issues were brought and put up on the table again, and my deepest hope and desire is that is another step forward in the right direction for us to really start addressing our real problems as such, right? I really hope it is. So again, where we are, again, hey, you know how old I am now. I'll take my hat off. You see, I'm a senior brother. I'm an elder. And I know that I won't be here, 10 years from now. And so the outlook change is taking place at a different rate than what it did during my lifetime, during my youth, when I had more energy. Again, my advice to the younger generation is to utilize these tools. Utilize YouTube, utilize Facebook, utilize Twitter, utilize all the tools that's available to move, again, the problem of black folks forward in the 21st century. Don't go back over and make the same mistakes that my generation made. All right, look at what we've done. Study it. Just don't have one or two young smart people. That is, see, smart mean they have the gray matter. Whether they have accumulated enough information, yeah, whether they've accumulated enough information, like one of, like some of our young brothers is what we have to address them. There's a lot of information for this generation to analyze and look at what we've already done to make the decisions they're going to make moving forward. I just hope that everyone isn't so arrogant that they want to throw us all out with the bathwater, and say everything that my generation did or the generation before me. I had a real hard time with a young brother from New York City that attacked Doc Ben, who brought a sense of consciousness, a sense of who we were, a sense of the fact that whereas Hollywood, the media, and even the American textbook industry had turned the ancient Nile Valley culture into that of white people. When I was in high school, they didn't have black folks as Egyptians in the textbooks. They had pictures of people in the textbooks from when the Greeks were there. So they had white people in Egyptian clothes and pushed that to us as Egyptians. And as I tell people, I didn't know until I went to Egypt in 1966 that the ancient Egyptians were black people. See, I had to find out going. So again, we don't need to make the same mistakes, and I have a lot of confidence when I see the energy of I call him brother RBG. Brother RBG is a young man with a lot of knowledge and the right type of attitude for teaching his generation things they need to know in order for them to make better decisions as they plan their adult life and what they're going to accomplish on behalf of our people in this society. My brother.
Hotep, Bob.
Hotep, again, keep up the good work. You know, like, I'm proud of you. If I had a son in the universe, I'd want him to be just like you are. Somebody who's conscious, that's out here working, you know, that's not running away from the problems, and knows, you know, like the kind of, that being at work on behalf of the great mass of the people is the thing that he should be about. So I'm proud of you, man, and I know your mom is, so, you know, so I think you're on the right path. This brother Trey, another young warrior of the future. Yeah, I mean, he's a warrior for the now. Now is the future in terms, but again, a young man with a sense of consciousness and a sense of mind that he is studying, he's watching the videos, and he's reading. He's learning and going forward. These are the kind of young folks that see, when I pass over the veil, I can pass over with a sense of satisfaction and not fear, knowing that it's young men like this that's picking up the baton that's going to move the goalposts further down the line over the next 30 to 40 years. So we have young folk that's out here. I've met some in Philadelphia. I've met some in New York City. You know, I've met some in Memphis, Tennessee. So for my sense of where we are and what kind of things are going on, we're moving in the right direction. But again, sometimes we can get ahead of ourselves. There's one of the young men out here in the community that is cussing and fussing about things and kind of dissing some of the elders. And I won't call him out on this forum publicly, but again, there are things that the elders have done which has made it possible for you to have the type of impact you're having now. See, like, if the fact that you'd be like, hey, Doc Ben, John Henry Clark, before, I mean, I'll go back to W.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, I'll go back to brothers who've been in this struggle a long time moving this line forward, right? And no, all of them weren't perfect in what they did. Yes, some of them might have done something here or there that we might not want to brag about. But that's the nature of real life. Again, all of us, you know, like the way we are made up of atoms which consist of electrons and protons. That's a negative charge and a positive charge. So we have both negativity and positivity in us. But us as human beings, what we have over every other life form on this planet, we have a conscious mind where we can make a decision. And we can understand sometimes there's the correct time to use negative energy. Negative energy is not always bad, but negative energy out of place is just wrong. You cannot always use positive energy. There are times when that's the best path to be on, but every once in a while there's a time when you have to use negative energy. If you're a man that's at home at night with your wife and your children and you hear somebody breaking in a back window, you're not going to run back there to that back window and go, peace and blessings, brother, how can I help you? See, I would hope that if you have the method of repelling somebody when you run back there to see that person, that you're running back there with that in your hand. You know, so there's a time to use positive energy and negative energy as such. But when you're talking about our ancestors and the contributions that all of us have made, again, you can make your point about the philosophy or the activity without belittling or trying to tear down the person. And that would be my advice to any younger person. I think that you can have good intention, but use the wrong tactic. And when you use that wrong tactic, you end up ostracizing yourself from the community. And they don't want to hear from you. because you're saying some of our better heroes, you know, were no good negative people, and that's not something that you should do.
Okay, peace, family. We're just addressing the issues of today, addressing the current state. We're here right now in Washington, D.C., front of Sankofa, right here on Georgia Avenue, Ward 4, if you know. Okay, and I'm right here with the wonderful Babatv. It's a pleasure, and I just want to know, as me being as a young person, and I see a lot of our young people who come into this knowledge might not be able to know about the process of really coming and understanding, you know, and understanding the holistic, spiritual, mental, physical, and community element to coming into this knowledge and not just feeding your mental aspect. And I think that has a lot to do with why we see a lot of these younger people, older than me, but, you know, younger people than the elders coming and speaking about these different elders and these ways and about the different ideologies, forgetting about, you know, what got them to be ready to change and upload their minds to 500 years of slavery and the other trauma that they know. So with dealing with that, if you're not dealing with a spiritual view and changing your mindset and how you feel, how can you possibly, you know, go forward without doing a holistic process and dealing with all the issues and not just feeding your mental, so you won't come back and say something evil per se and spit on the hands of elders and different things of that nature?
Ooh. Well, that's a deep, well thought out question. The answer is in the structure of the question. I mean, you really have to be holistic, and I can understand the anger that a lot of young people have. I mean, being here in 2018, looking around, with everybody else moving forward in the universe where they are secure in a way, while we still in this pitiful state. And we must be in this pitiful state because you adults older than us didn't do nothing to change things on our behalf. That's not true. If you think this is bad today, you should have been around in 1954 when Emmett Till was lynched, and the impact that that had on a lot of young men who was 10 to 12 years old, seeing that picture of a young boy beat up that badly and lynched, laying in that casket. Things were bad then, but during that time, it was sport for white men all over this country to catch a young black man somewhere by himself and take him out and hang him and have fun killing him. That was the, you know, they don't do that today. I mean, today they have police forces or guys in uniforms, you know, like, and all they have to do is say the black man scared them and they kill him. They shoot him with a gun. But the path, I would tell young people, don't be impatient. Knowledge, obtaining knowledge is not an event, it's a process. And if you really want to be impactful, you have to take the time to prepare yourself properly before stepping into the arena. Just don't be impatient. You know, like, get as much information as possible. But in a day and age like today, with the tools you have, I mean, you can create a video, you know, like using the tools of, you know, a laptop computer, and put something up on YouTube or another channel so fast to educate people. I would say use the creative genius that you have and to create a way of giving this information to your generation that is truthful, creative, and in line with how the folks are thinking today. What was it, last week or within the last 10 days, I hear that one of the top rap artists won the Nobel Peace Prize for his lyrics. So here's a guy, you know, telling the story of what's going on in our community, but he did it in a way that is thoughtful, creative, and really tells the story of what's happening on the streets of the black community. So I would use him as a type of example. You don't have to, you know, like, use a lot of profanity, cussing and fussing, you know, like, in order to make a point. You know, like, in fact, a lot of profanity turns a lot of good people with good intentions away from what you're saying, you know, like, as such. So be thoughtful, again, and be creative, and use these tools to tell the story in a different kind of way that today's generation will really understand it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes. Thank you, Bob.
You're quite welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have some space.
So, you know, from an elder standpoint, Baba, what does it mean to be an African man?
Okay. Well, look. Again, by an expression from one of my elder teachers who's gone, Kwame Ture used to say, you know, just because a cat has its kittens in an oven, that don't make them biscuits. He probably did. You're like, again, it's a classic statement to describe who and what we were. Listen, we are an African people. We were born here in the Western Hemisphere. As an African man, I consider myself a direct descendant of the original man on this earth.
Right.
You know, like if people don't want to use the word African because they say, well, I think it's something to do with the Romans having invented that, and I'm just something else. I'm an original black man. You know, like I am the son of an original black man, and my daddy was the son of an original black man. And African gives me the nation that produced at least 15,000 years of culture in terms of that I utilize in terms of how I express myself, the vibration and tone within my voice. It helps inform me in terms of what color combinations that I think look good on me. Because I am God's first creation, I have a responsibility of uplifting the rest of the genetic mutations that exist on the earth that are mutations of the original man. So I'm the original of the original. Or like my good friend said last week, Dr. James Small, you're looking at God in the person of Tehuti Evans. I am divine. My spirit is divine. It comes directly from the divine. And I try to carry myself and do with myself what I think a divine person should. I think that's all black men's responsibility. Unfortunately, the circumstances that we are raised in will get us off track. A lot of young men think their manhood is determined by the number of females' sexual conquests they have. That's not manhood. I mean, if you know, I can take you to any jungle over in the Philippines, in Southern Asia, and even some of the densely forested areas of Africa, and I can show you monkeys who can do that, and they can't think, or they can't create, they can't build anything. So manhood is building a community where you take care of your family and you provide for them. Manhood is understanding that of all the creations on this earth, we are the only ones that have the full capacity of being able to transform Earth's environment as we have it into what we want it to be. You know, like we're sitting on a bench that used to be a tree. You know, like this, you know, like in other words, we can transform stone, we can transform wood, we can transform water, we can transform every element that exists on this earth into any other form that we want. We have that mental capacity. You know, like what we need to learn is how to do it and stuff. You know, like they call out ancient science alchemy, trying to hide it from the word chemistry. Chemistry comes from alchemy, but we created chemistry. Yeah, we created masonry. We created the whole concept of building in stone. We created the concept of family. You know, like, and we created the concept of extended family, what were called tribes and nations. So understanding that I am descended from the creators of all those things give me a sense of being and pride and a sense of what my direction and behavior should be as such. And I think that's very important to give the information to pass on to the younger generation. But the fact that we are descended from the original man. You know, like all science, you know, like all science talks about the first man. Religion wanted to give him names, Adam and that kind of thing. But man originated in Africa. You know, like he left Africa and traveled all across the planet, and in doing so, conditions, environment, and other kind of things, some human beings mutated and look differently. But you are an original of the original man.
Gotcha.
All right. So for again, Black News 102 land, Babatv land out there, the world. Again, I just want to thank Baba for this opportunity to sit down and share a few thoughts with him that will make it to the new social media forces that are at play today. And I hope that somewhere in the details of what I've said, I've left some information or shared some information that will be useful for the healing, development, and the forward movement of our people here in this country and on this planet. Again, we're living in a new day, a new age, and we don't have to relive all of the errors of the past. But look at the past, as you know, we're at Sankofa, and what Sankofa symbolizes. Take a look at the past in order to make a decision on what we should be doing going forward. It was a good discussion. Again, I want to thank you, Baba. I want to tell the people of the world, don't give up. You know, get stronger and continue to move forward. And thank you very much.